I placed her wedding ring inside the last box I would ever make for her. It was walnut, with a grain that swirled deep, like a galaxy in miniature. I'd sanded it until the surface was smooth as silk, every corner perfect. But inside, resting on the black velvet lining, was a death, the death of 25 years of trust. Ever built something with your own two hands? A chair, a garden, a family? You know the feeling, don't you? That pride you get from looking at your work something real, something solid. Now, imagine finding out the foundation of it all was nothing but sand. What do you do? My workshop has always been my sanctuary. You're probably sitting somewhere comfortable right now, maybe on a cozy sofa with a hot cup of coffee. I hope so, because this story starts in a very different kind of place. A place filled with the smell of cedar and sawdust, where the only sounds were the steady shishi of a hand plane gliding over oak, or the deep, solid thump of a rubber mallet hitting a chisel. To me, that wasn't noise. It was music, the sound of creation. For nearly 30 years, I've been a woodworker. Wood doesn't lie. I've always believed that. You find peace in that kind of truth. And for 25 of those years, Isabella was part of that peace. She was my wife, my perfect counterpart. My world was solid, stationary things, hers was in fleeting moments, frozen in time. The sharp, clean click of her camera shutter used to be part of the soundtrack of our home. I loved how she saw the world, in a way my practical eyes never could. We'd built a good life together in that little house in Oregon. Now, with our girls grown and off chasing their own dreams at college, the house got quiet. And in that quiet, the cracks began to show. Maybe you've been there, too, that feeling when a chapter of your life closes. I saw it as a chance for us to find each other again. But for Isabella, the quiet felt like an accusation. Her commercial photography, which once brought her joy, now felt like a chore. One evening, through the steady drumming of rain outside, she let out a long sigh. She was sick and tired of shooting fake smiles at weddings, she said. It was soulless. She wanted to create art, something real. She started using that word a lot. Real. I tried to understand. I offered to build her a new darkroom, buy her any equipment she wanted. But what she was looking for couldn't be bought with money or built with wood. And then his name started popping up. Marco Valerius. He was a landscape photographer, a legend in Isabella's world. But when she talked about him, it was more than professional admiration. She'd show me his black and white photos, her eyes lit with a fire I hadn't seen in years, and ask if I could see it. She explained that he didn't just photograph a rock, honey. He captured the soul of the rock. She was obsessed with his philosophy that true art required sacrifice, that an artist had to break down their old self to find their true I. That phrase, break down your old self, sent a chill down my spine. In my world, you don't break things, you build them. And then, the acceptance letter came in the mail. A 6-week masterclass in Santa Fe, New Mexico, taught by Marco Valerius himself. I'd never seen her so happy, was all for it, having no idea I was cheerfully packing her bags for a one-way trip out of our marriage. As the departure date got closer, her excitement became an invisible wall between us. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with a friend, her voice tinged with a soft mockery, saying I wouldn't be visiting, that I wouldn't get it, that my world was all wood and screws, and that place, it was 4 different souls. My hand, always so steady, slipped. The chisel left a deep scar in the piece of cherry I was working on. When I walked inside, she hung up quickly, a smile a little too bright on her face, and assured me it was just girl talk. But I'd heard the truth. In her new world, I was an outsider. The insecurity gnawed at me. A few weeks before she left, I tried one last time, suggesting I could drive down to Santa Fe for a weekend, that I'd love to see the landscapes she was shooting. A flash of panic crossed her eyes. She quickly refused, her voice sickly sweet, explaining how intense the course was, how Marco demanded absolute immersion. The presence of anyone from her old life could disrupt the creative flow. Old life. That's what she called us. I felt the air suck out of my lungs. I'd become a distraction, an obstacle to her art. I didn't argue. I just nodded. It was a lie. It's the day she left. I drove her to the airport. We stood at the security gate in an awkward silence. I pulled her in for a long hug, trying to say everything with my arms that I couldn't with my words. But she was already gone, She walked through security and never looked back. I drove home with a hollow feeling in my chest. The house was eerily quiet. I went straight to my workshop, the only place I felt I belonged. But for the first time in my life, it offered no comfort. As I stood there, surrounded by my half-finished work, a cold knot tightened in my gut. It wasn't just the sadness of saying goodbye. It was a clear, cold realization that the woman who'd just left was never really coming back. And I had no idea that my worst fears didn't even come close to the truth. For the first 2 weeks, Isabella was gone. I lived in a state of willful denial. You know that feeling, right? When your gut is screaming that something's wrong, but your head tries to shut it down, tries to just cling to what's normal. I told myself I was just being sensitive, that the silence in the house was just silence, nothing more. I buried myself in work. The workshop became my fortress, a place I could hide from my own thoughts. The roar of the planer drowned out the whispers of doubt in my head. I focused on tangible things, measuring, cutting, joining. At least in here, things followed the rules. Things made sense. Our phone calls continued, but they felt like a poorly rehearsed play. She'd talk about the surreal light of the desert, the raw emotion of the landscape. Her fancy words floated through the phone, but they had no weight. They were like glittery dust motes in the air, pretty, but empty. Ever talk to someone you love and feel like they're reading from a script? It was exactly like that. I'd tell her about the cherry kitchen cabinets I was finishing, how the grain flowed like a river. Her response was always a hollow compliment, and "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," delivered in a distant voice, like she was answering from another planet. And then, on a Friday night, my denial was shattered. I'd been working late in the shop, my body tired, but my mind still racing. I came inside to grab a cold beer. The house was still, and the stillness now felt menacing. I sat down in my armchair, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, and then I saw it. A mutual friend had posted a photo. A group shot from Santa Fe, taken in front of an art gallery. A dozen or so smiling people, bathed in a honey-colored sunset. My eyes found Isabella instantly. She was standing next to Marco Valerius. At first, a little pang of jealousy tightened my chest, but then my craftsman's eye kicked in. I didn't just see a picture, I saw the composition. The composition was wrong, all wrong. Marco's hand wasn't resting on her shoulder in a friendly way. It was on her waist, a little too low, his fingers spread with a quiet possessiveness. And Isabella. She wasn't just standing beside him, she was leaning into him. An almost imperceptible shift of her weight. But it said everything. It said he was her center of gravity. And then I saw the final detail. The one that made the air freeze in my lungs. Her left hand, the one I had slipped a ring onto 25 years ago, was bare. The plain gold band, the solid symbol of our life together, was gone. The phone suddenly felt like a cold stone in my hand. The room seemed to blur at the edges, my whole world shrinking to that tiny, glowing screen. I zoomed in, my trembling fingers leaving smudges on the glass. There was no mistake. The finger was empty. My gut hadn't been lying. It had been screaming the truth, and I'd just covered my ears. There was no hiding anymore. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in our cold bed, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, I walked into my workshop, but not to work. I went there to find the truth. I sat down at my old laptop. I remembered the shared cloud account we used. It was a line we'd always respected. Have you ever been faced with a choice like that? The choice between respecting trust and a burning need to know the truth? I chose the truth. My hand shook as I typed in our password. Oregon Sunsets 25. The irony. The folders appeared, and I saw it. A new one. Studies. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a deep breath, and I clicked. At first it was just landscapes. Breathtaking, but I scrolled past them quickly. I was looking for something else. And then I saw a subfolder, labeled simply, Portraits. I opened it. It wasn't what I was expecting. It was worse. It was nothing explicit, just intimacy. Dozens of portraits of Marco, taken by Isabella. She had captured every angle of him, the way he squinted in the sun, his smug smile, his powerful hands. She'd studied him with an attention, a tenderness she once reserved for me. And then there were the photos he'd taken of her. Through his lens, she was a different woman. She laughed freely, without restraint. Her eyes sparkled with adoration. There was one shot of her looking at him, and in that look, I saw it all. The longing, the worship. I was watching my wife fall in love with another man, through her own artistic eye. It was a betrayal on the deepest level, more painful than any physical act could ever be. But the cold craftsman part of me wasn't done yet. I needed final confirmation, proof that couldn't be explained away. That day, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I hired a private investigator, a flat voice on the phone. It's an online payment. My request was simple and precise. I just needed one question answered. 2 days later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was a single word: report. I stared at it for maybe 5 minutes. This was it. The last moment of not knowing. The last moment before my world changed forever. I clicked. The email was brief, emotionless, and brutal in its honesty. It was a time-stamped list of events concerning the subjects: holding hands, kissing, and entering a residence together until the next morning. It came with 3 photos. 3 final nails in the coffin of my marriage. I closed the laptop. The rage didn't come. The tears didn't either. Instead, a strange, cold calm washed over me. I felt like I was standing in a forest after a wildfire. Everything was scorched. All that was left was silence and a terrifying clarity. I wasn't a betrayed husband anymore. I was something else. I stood up and walked into the main space of my workshop. My eyes landed on a raw block of walnut on my workbench, its grain dark and complex. The grief hadn't hit yet. Maybe it would come later, but right then something else took its place. Clarity as cold as steel. I knew exactly what I had to do. My next project wasn't going to be a table or a chair. It was going to be a box. It's a small, perfect box. And it would be the last thing I ever made for her. Have you ever had a moment of terrible, perfect clarity? A moment where all the noise in your head just stops, and the path forward, no matter how painful, is as clear as a pencil line on a plank of oak. That's how I felt standing in my workshop, the proof of my wife's betrayal smoldering on my laptop. A man's first instinct might be to smash something, to scream, but I'm a craftsman. I don't destroy things. I dismantle them. Clean break is like a perfect dovetail. Joint, no gaps, no filler, just 2 pieces separating cleanly. I would dismantle our life with the same care I used to build it. The plan formed in my mind, a detailed and emotionless blueprint. Step 1. Find a future. A place I could start over. Somewhere the ghosts of the past couldn't follow. Step 2. Handle the logistics. Lawyers, finances, the move. All of it had to be done quietly, under a cloak of normalcy. Step 3. Live the lie. This would be the hardest part, keeping up appearances until everything was in place. And step 4, the final step, deliver the message. A message that couldn't be misunderstood or denied, delivered in one final piece of work. That very night, I started step 1. Under the cold blue light of the monitor, I took a trip to Vermont. Images of vibrant autumn hills, quaint little towns, and thriving artisan communities filled the screen. It looked like another world, a promise. I found a workshop for rent near Woodstock. It was small, but it had big windows that looked out into a forest. The next day, I made the call. My own voice sounded strange to me, calm, decisive. I put down a 6-month deposit. Just like that. The first brick of my new life was laid. Next came the lawyer. His office in Portland was another world-polished mahogany, leather-bound books, and a heavy formal air. I sat across from him, an older man with eyes that had seen too many broken stories. I didn't waste time on the story. I just placed a thin folder on his desk, presenting the evidence and stating what I wanted. I told him I didn't want to fight. I didn't want financial revenge. She could have the house. All I wanted were my tools, my personal things, and a clean start. You can't put a price on a clean break, I insisted. The lawyer looked at me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, and remarked that my composure was notable. I told him it wasn't composure. It was precision. The hardest part, the true test of that precision, was the next 4 weeks. 4 weeks of living a dual reality. I had to be David, the husband patiently waiting for his wife to come home, while in my head I was David the architect, coldly building my exit plan. This was the toughest part. I wonder if you could do it. Could you listen to the voice of the person who shattered your world and answer with false words of love? Every few days she'd call. Her voice was still miles away, full of artistic words about transformation and enlightenment, and she'd say she missed me. I'd say I missed her too, all while standing in the living room, putting labels on cardboard boxes. Keep, leave. Each of her lies was a dose of poison, but it also strengthened my resolve. The irony of her talking about capturing the truth, when every word from her mouth was a lie, was as sharp as a freshly honed chisel. And between the phone calls, the trips to the lawyer's office, and the arrangements with the moving company, I began my final project. It's the box. I chose a block of walnut I'd been saving for years. Its grain was dark and complex, full of knots and unexpected swirls, like a life. I measured for the dovetail joints, one of the strongest and most intricate joints in woodworking. I used to think that was us, interlocked and unbreakable. Now I was crafting them for a box that would hold our breaking. Every night, after pretending to live a normal day, I'd retreat to the workshop. It became a ritual. The shishi of the hand, plain shaving off paper-thin layers of wood like shaving away layers of memory. The whisper of sandpaper, from coarse to fine, smoothing the sharp edges of the pane until only a perfect blank surface remained. I couldn't cry. Tears would stain the wood. When I wiped on the first coat of linseed oil, the grain of the walnut came alive. It darkened, revealing a deep, complex beauty. The box was painfully beautiful, a work of art born from deceit. I poured all of my skill, all of my patience, and all of my heartbreak into it. The last week, the movers came. As they left, my workshop felt cavernous, the echoes sounding strange and new. The night before Isabella flew home, we had our last call. She chirped with an excitement that sounded jarring to my ears now, saying how she couldn't wait to be home. The trip, she said, had changed everything. She had so much to show me, and she felt like she was seeing the world with brand new eyes. I held the phone to my ear, letting the silence stretch. I looked at the finished walnut box on my workbench, gleaming under the light. It was perfect. Then I replied, my voice frighteningly calm, that I felt the same way, and that I had something to show her too. I hung up. She was seeing the world with new eyes. Good. Soon enough, she'd be seeing our world that way too. Bare, hollowed out, completely empty. My last night in the house, I'd built with my heart, and my hands was the longest night of my life. Have you ever been a ghost in your own home? Walking through rooms that were once full of laughter, where the only sound now is the echo of your own footsteps? All of Isabella's things were still there, a ghostly presence of the woman I used to love. Her silk scarf draped over a chair, a half-freed book face down on a table, the faint scent of her perfume in the air. But they weren't pieces of a home anymore. They were artifacts in a museum to a dead marriage. I didn't sleep. I walked from room to room in a silent farewell march. I stopped in the kitchen doorway, where faded pencil marks tracked our daughter's heights through the years. I remembered the feeling of holding them, their backs against the cool wall, their giggles. The memory, instead of bringing warmth, was as sharp as a splinter under my skin. I let it hurt. I needed to feel all of it one last time. When the first rays of a new day, new life started to filter through the pine trees, I knew it was time. My final ritual took place at the dining table, the one I'd built for our 10th anniversary, its maple-top witness to countless family dinners, conversations, tears, and laughs. Now, it would witness the end. I placed the walnut box in the very center. In the weak dawn light, it looked formal and menacing. My hand was perfectly steady as I gently opened the lid. A soft, solid thud. Inside, on the black velvet, I began to arrange the items, one by one. First, the photos. I laid them down not with anger, but with a surgeon's precision. The picture of them holding hands, the picture of their kiss, the picture of the Jeep parked outside at dawn. 3 final cuts. Next, the ring. I picked up her wedding band from the small dish on the dresser. It felt cold and impossibly light in my palm. The symbol of an eternal vow, now just a hollow, meaningless thing. I set it gently in the middle of the photos, its gold shining against the black velvet. Finally, the note. My handwriting was clear, not a tremor in it. 12 simple words. I hope you found the picture you were looking for. This is our final piece of work. I placed the card on top, then I closed the lid. The click of the wood settling into place echoed in the silence. It was the sound of finality. The sound of a door closing for good. Beside the box, I placed my house key. A simple, absolute act of surrender. I walked out the front door. It's time. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, I'd drown. I just walked, and I didn't look back. The engine of my truck rumbled to life, tearing the morning quiet. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw my house in the rearview mirror one last time. It looked so normal, so peaceful in the morning light. No one would ever know a world had just ended inside it, and then I drove. I didn't speed. I just drove steady, putting miles between myself and the woman I once called my wife. The green pine forests of Oregon slowly gave way to the dry hills and vast sky of the east. The landscape changed, and I felt like I was shedding a heavy weight. The grief hit me in waves, a sharp pang in my chest that made it hard to breathe. This wasn't anger. This was loss. The raw, irretrievable loss of a life that was. I drove until I couldn't drive anymore, until my eyes were raw and my mind was exhausted. I stopped at a nameless roadside motel in Idaho. The room smelled of bleach and loneliness. Have you ever been somewhere completely anonymous? A place with no trace of your life in it? It's both terrifying and liberating. That night, in that strange silence for the first time, I just let myself feel. No more plans to make. No more lies to maintain. Just the silence and the shape of the hole she'd left in my life. The next morning, I woke up hollow. The pain was still there, but it had settled, like silt in a river after a flood. I sat in a roadside diner, the warmth of a coffee cup in my hands. I knew her flight had landed. I knew she was home. With a mix of dread and a grim curiosity, I turned on my phone. It nearly jumped out of my hand, buzzing like crazy with a flood of notifications. Dozens of missed calls, dozens of texts. I took a breath and opened the first message from her. Then the second and the third. They weren't what I was expecting. No apologies, no heartbroken remorse. Just confusion, then panic. She was asking where I was, why half the furniture was gone. She didn't understand what the box was, demanding to know what kind of joke this was. She ordered me to call her back immediately, wanting to know what was going on. And then, the final message, sent just minutes before I'd turned on my phone, was filled with blind indignation, demanding to know how I could dare do this to her, after everything she'd had done for this family. I read that last line, and for the first time in days, a cold, mirthless smile touched my lips. Everything she'd done, she still didn't get it. She thought this was a fight, some rash move on my part. She didn't realize that, for her, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I sat in that diner, the cold phone in my hand, and read Isabella's message over and over. Her question, demanding to know how I dared do this to her, was so full of self-righteous indignation that it was the final answer I needed. She didn't see it. She never would. When your world collapses, what's the first thing you do? You don't try to save what's lost. You check to see if what's left is solid enough to build on. For me, what was left was my daughters. I didn't answer Isabella. I called Sarah, my oldest. Hearing her cheerful voice on the other end felt like a punch to the gut. I was about to destroy a part of her innocence. I spoke slowly, choosing my words carefully, explaining that her mother and I weren't going to be together anymore. I told her that her mom had made some choices, and that I couldn't live with them. After a silence and a choked sob, she whispered my name, and I had to bite down hard to keep my composure. Then I did something I hated myself for. I sent her the 3 photos. I had to. I knew Isabella would paint a different picture, one where she was the victim. My girls deserved the truth, no matter how ugly it was. A few minutes later, a text came from Sarah. It said she was sorry, that she loved me, and that she was calling Emily. The next call was from both of them. On the video screen, I could see their faces, tear-streaked, but with a surprising resolve in their eyes. Sarah spoke for them both, promising they were with me, no matter what. That wherever I went, they would come. That we were still a family. Their voices, their unwavering support, felt like the first support beams going up on the ruined foundation of my life. They were what was real. They were what was solid. With that strength, I knew I could face the final task. I opened my email and wrote a short, simple letter to the woman who was once my wife, with the subject line, "The End," in it. I confirmed I'd received her messages and told her that all the answers she needed were in the box. I made it clear this wasn't a discussion. I told her my lawyer would be in touch, that the house and everything in it was hers, as the last thing I could give her, and I ended it with a simple goodbye. I hit send. Then, I went into my settings and blocked her number and her email. Clean cut. The sound of silence finally returned, but this time, it was peaceful. The rest of the drive was like a dream. I drove through endless plains and nameless cities. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks seemed to dissolve with every passing mile. The grief was still there, like a dull ache, but now it had room to breathe. When I got to Vermont, autumn was in full blaze. Have you ever seen a New England autumn? It's not just a season, it's a masterpiece. The hills were on fire with reds, golds, and oranges. I drove down a gravel road, and at the end of it, there it was. My new workshop, an old wooden barn, solid and honest, tucked against a forest. It was empty, and it was perfect. The first thing I unloaded was my toolbox. The familiar smell of oil and steel greeted me like an old friend. I picked up my favorite hand plane, feeling its perfectly balanced weight. This was where I belonged. This was where the real healing could start. The first few months were a blur of hard work. Built workbenches, set up my machines, turning that empty space into a true workshop. Every day my muscles ached, but my mind grew clearer. The physical labor, the focus required to create something from nothing, it saved me. My daughters kept their promise. Through their calls, I learned the fallout. After a period of denial and blame, Isabella had finally accepted it. The divorce was quick. My girls said she was still in the house, but that it felt empty now that my hand-built pieces, and with them, the soul of the home, were gone. Marco Valerius, the great artist, never came to Oregon. Her desert romance, it turned out, was a mirage that evaporated in the face of reality. The girls first came to visit for Thanksgiving. They brought laughter and warmth into the small apartment I was renting. We cooked together and walked in the woods through the fallen leaves. They spent hours in my new shop, curious about my work. Seeing them standing there, surrounded by raw lumber and sawdust, I felt a simple, whole happiness. My family wasn't broken. It had just changed shape. Now, the first snow has fallen in Vermont. Outside my workshop window, the world is white and quiet. Inside, a wood stove crackles, and the air smells of pine. I'm finishing my first big commission, a dining set for a young family in town. I run my hand over the smooth sanded tabletop. The grain of the maple flows, each line a unique story. I think about the walnut box, a piece born from pain and finality. And then I look at this table, a piece being made for hope and new beginnings. That's my story. The story of how my world was dismantled and how I built a new one with my own two hands. It's smaller and it's quieter, but every joint is true. The pain taught me a valuable lesson. The most beautiful things are, and the ones that are perfect, but the ones that have endured the breaking and still stand strong. My name's David. I'm a woodworker. I am rebuilding my life, one true piece at a time.